This is Ari Rios with Music Mastery, and in this video I'm going to perform the Trumpet 1 part from Colliding Visions by Balmages. After I play through the piece, I'll provide a tutorial on how to master this part so you are ready for your next rehearsal. Here we go. So this is going to start with a 3-count count-in, and then we'll have our first measure of rest. 1, 2, 3, 4, get ready, 5, 2, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 1, 2, 3. Two, 3, 4. I hope that performance was helpful. Now let's go through the piece phrase by phrase, and I'll provide some tips and tricks to make sure you know how to practice all the elements in the piece. If you need more help with technique or something that isn't covered in this tutorial, make sure to check out the fundamental videos in the lesson library. So let's start by talking about the terminology. If you'll notice at the beginning, it says andante lyrico, or lyrico. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But I did look up the translation, and it stands for slowly and lyrically. So we probably already know, if we've been in band for a while, andante means to play slow or laid back. But the second word, lyrically, what does that mean? We know lyrics go to a song. When we're playing lyrically, it means we're going to be smooth, connected, and song-like, like we're a vocalist singing a beautiful melody. So think long, smooth, and connected. And that's going to be how we stylize the beginning. Something else that we should talk about in the first section of the piece is intonation. Because it's so slow, we're going to be very exposed, and if we can do anything to help it, we want our intonation to be helped. So there's a couple notes that are difficult in this for a couple reasons. First is in measure 12 on beat 2 and 3. We've got a half note on a low D. So to play that, obviously we'll press down the first and third vowel, but we need to kick our third vowel side with our left ring finger. So when you're playing, if you don't kick it, it might sound something like this. So you want to make sure that you get that vowel slide out so it lowers the pitch. The other note to do that on is the A on beat 2 of measure 14. So for that, you can't use your third vowel slide. You need to use your first vowel slide if you can. So it'll sound like this. It might be hard to see. Watch my thumb here. And again, if you don't kick that out, the note's going to be a little bit sharp and it's not going to sound as beautiful as it can. Alright, so then looking at the next section, which comes up pretty quick, obviously there's a tempo change. So you want to make sure that you're watching the conductor and counting and being prepared for when the tempo gets faster. So I tried to follow along in the recording, and you can count the first two in your head, and then once you see the measure number that's written in your part, 19, you can start saying 19, 20, 21, to help yourself keep track through that spot. And then when you get to your measures of rest, just like me, you can start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3. That way you know where you are in that chunk of time. So of course, being prepared for the time change. And the style is also going to change whenever we get into the second section. So while the beginning was smooth and connected, super lyrical, we want the second section to contrast this significantly. This is going to be a little bit more articulate, a little bit more lively and energized. So to achieve that on our trumpet, try adding a little bit more weight at the front of the notes. What do I mean by that? Take a listen. So while we might have, let's look at the phrase. In measure 26, we could do something like this. But that's not the correct style for this. There's a crescendo, and we know, based on how it sounds in context of the piece, that this is supposed to collide with the vision of the first phrase. So it should instead have a little bit more weight and bounce. Listen to this time. So it's almost like a staccato or an accent, but you don't need to go overboard. Just a little bit more lift in between the notes. Again. And I think it's important that the eighth notes have even more energy because they happen over a shorter duration of time. So there's less time for them to speak. Make sure you put enough focus and energy into the little notes, that is, the eighth notes in this case. Alright, and that same idea is going to carry through the rest of that section. Anytime you've got, especially quarter notes and eighth notes, make sure that they've got weight on the front and a little bit of lift after that. Kind of like a soft accent. However, later in the phrase, starting in measure 35, we have real accents. So these need to be even more weight and even more lift than we did in measure 26. So listen here, 35. An accent should sound something like this. And you're going to hear all kinds of accents. Your director or your teacher might tell you to play softer, louder, longer, shorter. But for the most part, you should be approaching them with a little bit more weight at the front and a little bit quicker decay. And by decay, I mean the sustain of the note is going to drop. So if it's like da, as opposed to da, it might be like da, 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 instead of da, da, da. So something to think about is the way that the note sustains when you're playing accents. But of course, in any piece, it's going to vary, so make sure you listen to what your teacher suggests. Alright, and then in the third section, first, let's talk about measure 51. Measure 51 is just one note repeated over and over again, but it's really important that our articulation is very clear here, because that's all we have to do musically, is to play the rhythm and articulation in a musical way. So, to practice this, slow it down and listen to the quality of the sound at the beginning of the note. Do all the fronts sound the same? And do your eighth notes sound different from your quarter notes? Or do your quarter notes sound kind of like eighth notes? What you should focus on is having a clear front and a consistent approach, so that way every note sounds the same. That way, whenever you go through the phrase, it's a little bit more impactful. Alright, and then finally, the last section in 67, again, you want to be prepared because there's a time change, and we slow down by quite a bit. We go to 60 beats per minute, so again, make sure you're watching your conductor and you're counting in your head, and so you're prepared for that time change. There's going to be a flute part before you come in, but don't let that distract you because the trumpet part in measure 71 is very exposed and it's very delicate. So you want to approach it with confidence, but some care. You don't want to overblow because this is supposed to sort of fade out at the end, and you don't want to upset, or you don't want to interrupt the vibe by like just overblowing it. And it can be easy to do that when you play trumpet. So something like this at 71. And I bet your director will think it's really, really cool if you can play that really, really well at a very soft dynamic. So practice playing that softly and beautifully. You don't want to play it softly and poorly, just soft and beautiful. So that's that last section. And then the shh at the end is worth mentioning because you're going to have to take the trumpet off of your face in order to do that shh, if that's how they're doing it. But you can't just chop that release. So what I suggest is doing a very slight fade out in like the last beat or last eighth note of that measure. Something like this, starting on 71. Otherwise, if you just cut that release, it's going to sound like this. Which isn't as elegant. So it's a small detail that can make a big difference in the whole environment and performance that the piece creates when you play it. So that's Colliding Visions. I hope this video was very helpful to you. If you're enjoying these videos, make sure to encourage other members in your ensemble to join MusicMastery.band so that everyone in your section will have their parts mastered for every rehearsal. Remember, you get 3 requests per month as a member. We're looking forward to helping you master your next piece of music.